Welcome, I'm Karen Frankel and I'm here to get you all drawing, and it's fantastic to have you joining me on another sunny afternoon in Perth, and I hope it's sunny where you are. This demonstration today is going to have a lot of happy accidents, and you're just going to have to go with the flow, as I said before, and you'll see what I mean by happy accidents. We're going to be working with ink resist. And there are lots and lots of different kinds of ink, and I know that many of you will not have ink. So there are other things that you can use. So I'm going to be showing you a bit about that as well. So I'll talk about the ink that I'm going to be using first. And it is commonly known as Indian ink, but not always. So it depends on the brand that you particularly have. There's lots and lots of different brands, but in particular you need to have a waterproof ink, and I know that Indian ink is synonymous with ink that once it's dry it is waterproof. So if you see the word India in there, you can be pretty sure that it's waterproof. But the best thing to do, of course, is to look and see in the directions whether it's waterproof. This says indelible, so that's the same thing. It remains, and once it's dry you can't move it. So that is the ink that I am going to be used. However, lots of you are not going to have that ink. If you have got any ink for pens, so I remember in my day when I used to write with a fountain pen, it was called Quink ink in South Africa. I'm sure it still exists. And you can get black and blue, so it actually doesn't matter what ink you use. So if it's not waterproof, you will have some other things happening with it, and you won't be able to add a color later on, but that's okay. You'll still get a beautiful effect, so don't worry too much. And at the very least, if you haven't got any ink, you can use some watercolor that you've got, as long as you mix it so that it's pretty watery. You can still have a very intense color, but make it watery. You could probably even do this with food coloring, anything that has a watery color. Now, when I say watery, I don't actually mean very faded. I just mean a color that is mixed to a consistency that water is. So we're not using a creamy, we're not using gouache, we're not using acrylic, so it needs to be a color that is in water for this technique to work. If it's not waterproof, the only thing that is going to change is that you won't be able to add a color later if you did want to add a color on top of your black. So there you can see my picture of Miss Durton that I just picked from the garden this morning. Now you can see, as usual, I've got my paper here, and I'm anticipating that people are going to ask me what kind of paper am I using. Now, in these books, they are just my cartridge paper, which is my drawing paper. So I try to use that every single week because that is the most common paper. However, this technique will work better if you are using a stronger paper and a watercolor paper if you like as well. But for today's purposes, it's going to be fantastic just to show you the technique and for you to work with it as well. I'm not sure if everyone's got what they need to work with today, so it doesn't really matter. I did do a trial bit earlier, and the paper behaved like blotting paper. So some cartridge paper is better than others, and later on when I wet the ink, you will see what I mean by blotting paper, and I'll explain that a bit further. Now, the main thing that I need to start off with is this candle. It's a broken candle, and you can see that it is quite dirty. And so I've been busy rubbing these dirty marks off onto another piece of scrap paper, because I'm going to be drawing with this candle. And this is the part that I didn't tell you. And you're going to get a little bit confused by this, so just go with it. So you are not going to be able to see what is going on with that candle. I'm probably going to be able to see, because when I did my test look, this bright light on the side reflected off the candle, and I could see exactly what I was doing with it. So if you can't see, that's the way it's meant to be. Okay, so you're just gonna believe me that I'm drawing with quite hard lines, and I'm using the candle as if it's a pencil. Now I wonder if you can see anything on there. I can't tell. Let me know in the comments if you can see anything. Hello Sharon, nice to have you this afternoon. Okay, so I'm literally using this candle like a pencil. I'm not sure if I'm going to draw everything, and you'll see why in a minute. So I've just got these leaves happening. I can actually see the reflection. I can see this wax shining up at me. You can see it shining a little bit as well. So typically when you do this, you will not be able to see it shining. You can see some marks, Lois? Yes, okay. Jan, you can't see any? Yes, there's a shine. And if I turn that off, that's probably gonna, yeah, that's gonna lessen the shine. Now I can't see. So I'm gonna be in the same boat as you. You're not meant to be able to see, and that's why I cleaned the wax, because if you draw and you've got dirt there, you can see these marks on the paper. So there's my flower there. Now, so the object of the exercise at the moment is to draw with this candle as if it's your pencil, and I am actually pressing quite hard because I want to leave that line on the paper. You can sort of bend your head this way and that to see if you can see the lines, but I honestly, it works better if you can't. So you work with more or less where you've got some things happening. As I said, this is a technique that will loosen you up. So if you find that you are getting very precious about your work, it's a really beautiful technique. I might put the edge of the vase there. And I know I haven't put in any of these stalks. And I haven't drawn the edge of the leaves. Okay, so you've got the same thing. I can't see anything on my paper there. And you've just watched what looks like nothing on earth happening on that paper. Okay, now comes the exciting bit. I've poured a little bit of ink into a little bowl, and this is one of my favorite sticks. You are going to draw with a stick, and you can see that it's my favorite stick because it's been dipped into black very, very much, and you are going to find yourself a little twig. As long as it's fairly sturdy, we don't want any fiddly, tenderly bits that are just going to bend. And you are going to draw exactly what you've just drawn with a stick instead. And this is where the happy accidents come in, and I'm pleased that I've turned that light off. You're going to more or less draw where you drew before, but you don't know exactly where you drew before, and it's going to be more exciting if you don't. And you will feel the wax underneath the stick, and where the wax is, the ink won't come down. So I'm dipping in there, I'm banging it a little bit because I don't want a very big drop. And I can also drag some of this ink that's on the page. You can see it's thick and thin. Now earlier I said something about blotting paper, and as this paper will absorb that ink quite quickly. So don't worry about the fact that some lines are thin and there's some blobs there, but I'm actually going to add some of those lines. I don't think that I added those lines before. Okay, so now I am not worrying about where my wax is. I'm just drawing over it. So each time I dip my stick, I'm getting a nice big blob of ink. So you're not going to be terribly accurate with this, but that's the kind of effect that I want. Okay, so the other flower was over here somewhere. And there's some little spikes there. I've got the flowers right in front of me, which is an even better view. Oh, thanks for my likes and my hearts. If anyone's coming into the video, I'd love you to say hello. Let me know that you're here. So the beautiful thing about drawing flowers and petals and this sort of thing is, even if you're not exact about it and not too precious about it, you can still get a sense of what these flowers look like, even if it's not exactly like your picture. And that's the kind of drawing that I like to do. It's all about what this looks like rather than what the original subject looks like. And I try to keep that in mind whenever I'm doing anything creative, including painting. So we've got some lines coming there. Nene, welcome, you made it. Now I have forgotten where my wax lines are. They're more or less in the same place, but I'm not overly worried. Have I done this big one here? I don't think I have. Okay, now I need to put a stalk in that's going up to that flower, and they're not particularly matching, are they? There you go. Maybe that matches a bit. And this leaf comes behind there, and there's a leaf up there, and there's a leaf that goes. Thank you, Nene. I'm glad you like it. Now I know that a lot of you use the same picture that I use for your inspiration, but of course you're very welcome to take some flowers out of your garden or some photographs of flowers that you've got. Oh, I know what's missing. This big leaf is sort of going into that leaf. I'm not sure if it's going behind or where it's going. Okay. Thank you, Justin. Nice to see you on board. Okay, so I'm now going to keep my ink and my water away from my computer. So I'm going to take this away, and I'm not going to use this again. Okay? Try and limit yourself, even though, of course, you can do other things. But for purposes of keeping it simple, I'd like you to limit just that once. To do your stick work. I don't want you to add more stick work at this stage. Jasminka, you have midsummer, but you don't enjoy it because of the COVID. Absolutely. I understand that completely. So, Jasminka, I'm glad you think that's impressive. Now, I've got a nice big jar of water here, which I'm also going to keep away from my computer. But what I've also got is some tissue, some kitchen paper here. You can use tissue, you can use, what's it called, a rag, whatever, just so that you can control the amount of water that you've got. Okay. Now comes the fun bit. There are areas here, you can't see it, and in fact I think I'm going to turn my light on again so that you can see a bit better. Can you see the wax showing up now? Okay, so when you dip your paintbrush in water, this is just a cheap nylon brush. You do need one that comes to a point because you might need tiny, it's nice to get a smaller area. So you don't need it dripping like that. So just take off a little bit. Hello, Renza. You missed the start, but you can catch up later. Welcome to the video. So you can see that some of the black is still shining. So the paper has absorbed some of the black, and depending, as I said, on the type of paper you've got, it will be absorb a lot or a little. And what you're going to do is, where you've still got these big lumps of black, you're going to grab some of those and you are going to spread them. So I am going to spread them and make the flowers a bit darker. This is the part that gets everyone confused, I must admit. So you're just going to play with, spread some of this ink. Can you see how it's spreading as I add the water? You're gently going to touch the edge of the dark, and the ink will come away where the ink is still wet. So, oh, I think I will need to turn that off because that's shining way too much. So can you see, as I've wet that petal, you can see it looks like blotting paper because it's absorbed all of that dark there has just been sucked in. I'll give you another example of what I mean by blotting paper. Usually with watercolor paper, it stays on the surface, the paint stays on the surface. But if it's like blotting paper, or if your watercolor paper is old, it will lose the sizing. Now, sizing is the glue in the paper that creates that that effect where the watercolor doesn't go directly into the paper like blotting paper. And you can see I can't spread that ink on that piece of scrap paper. That's because it's been absorbed immediately, as I said, like blotting paper. So don't worry overly much about it. I just wanted to explain what's going on. And as you're putting the water on, you need to choose which areas of your flower you are going to put water on. And some will be darker than you wanted it to be. So that petal that I've now put on is a bit darker. It is not going to be like your original photograph, okay? We are changing things as the accidental things happen with your brush, okay? So you can still use your paper to absorb if you've got too little. Can I also suggest that you don't blot it like that? Because if you blot and you just take a big wad of tissue paper, you will smear everything, and you don't want that to happen. If your paper is a bit better than mine and you've got, but you end up with too much water, take a bit of tissue and twirl it into a little bit like that so that you can put it down and soak up any extra. I'm not needing to because my paper is absorbing everything. Okay, I've decided to keep those pieces there without any paint on, and I'm probably talking a bit too much because, and if I talk a bit too much, the ink is going to dry before I have time to spread it. So I'm now deciding to spread this one. Now, most cartridge paper is not as bad as this. So this is a bad example of, or this is the worst that it will be, put it that way. And I think it looks pretty good. So if this is the worst that it's going to be, then you're still going to have fun. How's that for a decision there? Okay, and I better stop talking so that I can fill more of this in before the paint all dries. So I'm just going to go ahead. Can you see how careful I am being with my brush? Now you do need to fill in, that is, move the ink around quite a bit, because what we want to see are these beautiful accidental areas where we've got the wax. Okay, so that's where the happy accidents are going to be. So even if there's areas where the ink is dry, you can take it from where the ink is wet and extend it a bit. So I'm extending some of those lines there a little bit with my brush. Now obviously at the moment this is a black and white painting or drawing. So that's what we're doing, we're drawing with the brush. So I'm quickly having a reference look at my photograph there. I'm rinsing out some of the black that I picked up. Ah, here's a good tip. If you actually dry your brush off with your tissue paper, so you're not completely drying it, it is still damp, you can absorb. Can you see how I'm lifting some of that ink? It's getting sucked into the brush. Can you see the brush has got a black tip now? So if you want to control some of your water, instead of using that to pick some up, you can use your brush. So I'm quite liking the effect. Now I can see that more people are coming on. Say hello, it would be lovely to know that you're here. Now if you wanted to, you could do this with a yellow orangey ink, and your nasturtiums would look absolutely amazing. You can obviously drop other inks in there if you wish, but at the moment I am only working with the black ink, as you can see. Now can you see I'm just putting water there, but nothing's happening because that ink is dry. So there's some ink. It would be nice if this was darker than the flowers. It is darker than the flowers in the actual photograph. Thanks, Pam. That's lovely to see that you're watching. I know that you're a fan of this technique. So I am resisting the urge to put some more ink in. I only want to work with this ink at the moment. Where else should I put some ink? How's that looking, guys? Maybe down there, the stems. Now I know the stems in the photograph are lighter. But this is being creative. This is a bit freeing. Now, what you can also do is, I'm going to put that big leaf that goes behind. I'm going to wet that. And as I said before, there isn't any ink there. So I'm going to touch the ink on the edges. And if I want to make it darker, but I haven't got enough ink on the edges to give me a dark, what I can do is actually go to one of the other places where I've still got a lot of ink, and I can drop that in because I want to get a nice contrast there. Isn't that gorgeous? How's that looking? Oh, I'm glad that you're liking this. So can you see how loose you have to be? You can't be fussy with this technique. Oh, I'm glad you're all enjoying it. Okay, so this has got hardly any color on it. We might like that. Or we might like to go and get some black ink from somewhere else and put it in. Can you see these bubbles here? That's because the quality of the paper is terrible. Will earbuds also be affected with absorption? Yes, they probably would. They're not quite as pointy as a brush, but they would definitely help. So when I'm picking up paint off or some ink from other areas, I'm trying not to spread it there and keep it for where I want the dark to be. So even if the whole leaf isn't dark, what I'm trying to do is create an effect of dark here and light there. Grab some more ink. The reason I don't want you to get more ink is because we are too gung-ho about it. We are too full on, and what will happen, or what might happen, is that you end up with the whole thing being black. And there's enough ink to play with on your page. And this was on a page that was absorbing the ink a lot. So if you've got a page that isn't absorbing the ink quite as badly as this one, or well as this one, then you will have a lot of ink to play with and you don't need to worry. So can you see that I'm coming back in to the edges because I want the darks to go against the lights. So I think I'm pretty much beginning to run out of dark ink. We still got any wets here? How's that looking? Okay, that's not looking too bad. That will actually look a lot better, or a lot different, not necessarily better, if you wanted to add a bit of color. I don't usually do quite as much as that. And as I said, this paper is terrible. It is shocking. In fact, it's the worst paper I've used, but I quite like the effect. So sometimes you can use, you know, terrible paper or terrible things, and it still produces something that's pretty attractive. I'm glad that you're fascinated by it, Jasminka. But for me, the beauty of this technique is all of these lines that originally were the shapes of the flowers, but we now, because we couldn't see it, and we created new shapes of the flowers, they now become those happy accidents on the rest of the paper. Now, sometimes it looks easy when I'm doing it. I promise you it's much easier when you do it than you think it is. Sometimes what you can do is, instead of actually putting the tone on your thing that you've drawn, you can do it in the background as well. I'll show you that very, very carefully. Can you see how, very quickly, can you see how it's leaked out onto the paper there? So if I just draw a random flower, okay, this is a random flower. This comes from your head, these flowers that are just loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loop, okay? So I'm going to quickly put some ink on there. And that's what I did for my flower, right? We can make it effective by maybe filling in the background or the areas. So sometimes you've got wax things in the background that you can't see until you wet. Okay, so what I'm showing you now is, oh, excuse my head in the way. I didn't realize my head was going to be in the way. So now I'm going to wet, what am I going to wet? I'm going to wet these ones in here. Now I haven't waited, I haven't been talking, so there's a lot of ink on there. So I might like to just suck up some. Actually, I'll suck up some with my brush. Watch what happens. Look how black my brush has gone, and I can just rinse it. I have got one that I prepared earlier because I wanted to dry it and show you what it looks like. Okay, so that's happened because there's tons and tons of ink on there, but I don't mind that. Hello, Lubov, is that how you pronounce your name? From Russia, is that the first time that you've been on with us? I'm glad that you love the lessons, but what I was going to show you was putting the background on, which will leave your petals light. So that's why I did this little one. And you can see that, look where my wax is. So you wouldn't be able to see that wax unless you filled in the background or the negative shapes. So this was just a quick demonstration of, and you can see how dreadful this paper is. I should have brought some watercolor paper to show you, but it is showing you the effect anyway. Okay, so you can choose to leave that. You don't actually have to paint all the shapes that you have done. Right, the last thing I'm going to show you is, this was what I did a bit earlier. Didn't work particularly well. I don't think it looks very good, but hey, we've got to go with the flow. This is live. But what I wanted to show you was what happens when it's dry. Okay, so if you are with a waterproof ink, this will dry, and if it's dry, you won't be able to spread that ink anymore. If you're using watercolor, or if you're using the Quink ink, the pen ink, that sort of thing, then it will spread. Probably not quite as much as when it's, you know, all those big drops, but it will spread. What I've got here is a watercolor palette, and this is just to show you what you can do. I've wet my red there. Maybe I'll turn it into a bit of orange. It's very, very dirty. Let's clean up my watercolor palette. I want to show you how this can look once it's dry. I've actually sometimes put some of my tissue collage on top of this, and it's worked fantastically. Hello, Raylene. Lovely to see you. I haven't met you before. Welcome. So if you put color over your black, look how amazing that looks, okay? Don't worry about what the picture looks like. I just want you to look at how what the ink looks like, what the color looks like going over your ink. And if it's watery, it will catch and highlight those places where the wax is. Again, look how gorgeous that is. And what happens with the black is that it just lies underneath your color to give some tone. I wonder if some of this will work on here. It's probably not dry enough, but let's give it a go. So because the black is not dry, it is actually picking up some of the black and getting a bit muddied. I've forgotten what's flower and what's leaf. So if you do want to work with it while it is still wet, then you run the risk of the black ink going into your flowers. If you still want to experiment and you don't mind, then go for it. The one thing I will suggest though is when you're adding color, don't paint by numbers. Don't paint carefully and all, don't worry if you don't go quite to the edge of the line. Don't worry if you go outside of your lines. It's all going to look fantastic. It's meant to be loose. Let's put some red into these ones, shall we? This is my pinky red. I didn't get the red that the actual nasturtium is. And of course, if you want, you can make a green to put on your leaves. I'm going full bore now. And of course, I haven't painted any outline at all. Sorry, not outline. I haven't painted any background. So this is just a bit of fun. And that's all it's meant to be. It is very, very much a very good way of loosening up, because you are not controlling the ink very well, and that's deliberate. So you're using that stick. I don't know what I've done with it. Oh, it's in the ink stool. So you're using a stick deliberately so that you can get rough lines. Sometimes there are big dollops, sometimes there's thin lines. The whole point of it is that I don't want you to be totally in control of what you're doing. So, believe it or not, that's it. And I promise you, even when you work on it, you will find it much quicker than you thought. I will show you that my hands are getting covered with ink. I've actually put on an old painting top because I knew that I was going to be working with permanent ink. So if you get it on your clothes, you will not be able to wash it away. I have some news about my book to tell you. I have had to extend the launch date by 2 weeks. I'm getting a little bit anxious that it's not going to be ready for the end of August. It is very, very, very close. And one of the reasons also for extending it is to give you some time to pre-order it. So I'm working on getting that to you, getting the availability on a website for you to order the book. And there will be some bonuses on that when you order it before the launch. So look out for some emails coming your way about the bonus that you will get if you order it before the launch. So I'm still very excited, still working hard behind the scenes. I've got some people helping me out, and I really look forward to getting it printed and getting it out to you. And I hope you've enjoyed the session. It was a bit of a crazy one. I'm looking forward to seeing all your work on Get Drawing. Karen Frankel signing out for another week. I hope to see you on our Tuesday afternoon critique. Get drawing. Bye-bye.